Hey, good morning, everybody. Hot day in Wisconsin. Yesterday it was in the plus 80s, and for us, that's a big jump when you're talking about 3 weeks ago we had snow in the air and piles on the ground. Anyway, so that if you hear the air conditioner going, that's why. It's already hot in here. So I hope you'll forgive the sound of the hum if you can hear it. If you can't, great. And but if you can, that's why. Anyway, we're gonna be chatting it up today with the Bulletproof Pastor, Tyler Woods. We've got a really good topic today, one that's theology central, but one that's not just theology central in terms for theologians, but everybody. We're going to be talking about the creeds, the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed. If you don't know what they are, you're going to be in for a great time. If you do know what they are, you're going to probably learn a bunch of stuff and hopefully reinforce what we believe, why we believe it. Do you believe it? that sort of thing. This is a big deal today. So that said, I've got to bring the Bulletproof Pastor on because I want to. Well, long story short, here we go. Good morning, Tyler Woods. How are you? I'm discombobulated today. How are you, sir?
Good morning. Can you believe it?
I can believe it, and I do believe it. I believe a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, it's 80 degrees here this morning, and it's heading for hot.
Yeah. I have to. You got to talk to the people because I want to put the creed up on the screen, but I got to actually do it in real time so they'll see. I don't know what they'll see. So you talk. Tell them good morning and stuff.
Good morning. Glad everybody can be with us, and I guess we're going to dismiss with listing all of the names because we can see them all over on chat. Everybody can see them. Good morning to everyone here, and it's all good night. We're all family here. And when we talk about what we believe, it kind of goes into the history of how the church was put together. And churches didn't have the organizational list of members like we do. And they didn't have organizational papers that talked about their statement of faith of what they believe. If you go to a particular church, it's assumed you're a believer and that you subscribe to what that church teaches and preaches, but that kind of gets muddied sometimes. So they came up with these creeds, which kind of is their statement of faith.
Yes.
And they're pretty cool stuff.
All right. Okay. So this is not ideal the way that this is. I'm not going to be able to do it really fast to make it all fancy schmancy, but there it is up on the screen. Here we go. And this one is the Apostles' Creed. So let's start out like this. How many of you guys have memorized, or at least did have memorized, the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed? Because I did when I was a kid. It was part of the catechism. It was part of the process when you were a Lutheran kid, which I was. I grew up in the Lutheran church.
As I did. And
I had to memorize those things. And it was part of what you just had to do. And the funny thing is, okay, so Dan's saying he memorized them. Yes, both. Adele. Laura, so did Steve Ganink when I was pretty young, says Pepperleah. Yeah. So I remember memorizing them. And to be honest, when I was little, they didn't mean much.
Yeah.
Truth be told, because you're just doing what your mom and dad told you to do, and you're trying to just get through it, right?
Yep.
As a matter of fact, I grew to dislike the Nicene Creed. Which one is the Nicene Creed? The longer one? That's the longer one. Yes.
Yeah, because it's long.
And that's why when we were
because it takes more work, and I just like work.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was like literally in church when it would come up that you had to say it. and I was like, oh gosh, this is a long one, and I hated it because it was like it's taking away time for me to go play outside or do whatever I want to do, and so the creeds. Let's start like this. Why are they important? Not only are they a statement of faith, but convince me why this matters today.
Well, it codifies what we believe. To codify is to put it in words and to make concise, and it sort of like condenses the boilerplate fundamentals of our faith, and they are quite beautiful. When I'm in how it does that for us. When I was in Bible school, now we're talking about Baptist Bible College, and I'm writing theology papers and taking theology exams and things like that. I am amazed how often it was the creeds that came up in my memory, in my heart, in my thinking, that were the framework of my answers. And they really, by the way, I got straight A's.
Ah, well,
those Lutheran creeds, they weren't Lutheran either, and they weren't Catholic either. They were church, first century church. And they were the foundational boilerplate for my Baptist theology papers that got A's.
Well, and you're touching on something that I think that is the reason why they are still so very important and neglected. I would say today they're extremely neglected. If you don't go to a air quotes high church, meaning like one of the ones that we can explain better than I'm going to say, but one of the ones that actually still do liturgy. If you don't go to a high church, chances are you may never even heard of them. And but the reason why I think that it's so important is they frame out, like you were saying, the fundamentals. These are the things that, you know, guys, when I keep saying, hey, we can debate about all the non-essential things in the church, in doctrine, whatever, but these are the fundamentals. These are the things you don't cross. These are the lines that are the lines in the sand. These are it. And it frames out who is God, who is Jesus, who is the church, what is salvation. Those are the things that they frame out perfectly.
And who is a believer?
Yeah, I would add that. Yeah. But these are the things these are the do not cross lines, if that makes sense. Yeah. After that, we can debate whether or not you can be baptized and go to heaven or not. Tell to the guy on the cross, the thief that got to go. He didn't get baptized, but then there's that
in water.
I digress. The point is, because I know I picked a fight with him because I know he's bulletproof is all about it, and I am too, just not probably theologically the same. And that's one of the very, very few things that we probably would even butt heads on a little. But those are the things, I think, the lines in the sand that are the do not cross lines. So, question for you: how did they come about?
Well, I'm not sure about the Apostles' Creed.
And nobody does. That was a trick question.
Yeah, because it just sort of popped up.
Yeah, you're right. It was I think that the early church had to just say, all right, what do we really believe? Let's write it down. Somebody get some scroll. Somebody got some paper. Anybody got any papyrus?
It was the great grandfather of Thomas Jefferson.
Maybe. But the Nicene
Adams,
Creed,
whoever, the
exactly.
The writers of the Constitution, the framers.
But now the Nicene Creed is different. We know when it was written. We know or when it was actually formalized. 325, right? 325 AD. So,
well, actually, there were 3 different councils of Nicaea that
there we go.
That edited it and brought it about.
But that was the final one.
Yeah.
So why did we need to reform the Apostles' Creed?
Well, the Apostles' Creed had some, it was good. There was nothing wrong with the Apostles' Creed. It had some areas that were lacking, that were allowing that people could ascribe to the Apostles' Creed and yet still cling to some pretty terrible doctrines that were flying around in the Christian church and splitting believers. And the Apostles' Creed wasn't addressing those issues. So the difference between the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed or Nicene Creed is that the Nicene Creed emphasizes more heavily the Trinity and the holiness of God in all three persons. So that part needed to be, or the church felt that part needed to be more heavily emphasized. To make a division between these other doctrines and what the Bible taught.
Right. Well, and if you don't know, Nicene is just a reference to a place, a church. It's not a person, just so that you have some clarification there. The Church of Nicaea, that's where it came out of. And to address a few things, because I'm looking at some of these comments, I know that there's a lot of people that get hung up on the Holy Catholic Church or Catholic as a word, because some people have had bad experiences with the Catholic faith. And I'm not dogging on the Catholic faith. I'm just saying that people mention that. And truthfully, we had a bad experience with the Catholic faith, but I know a lot of Catholics who are amazing people and who are living a godly, amazing life. So I'm not dogging. I'm just saying that I understand that there are people that say, well, I have a problem with, this creed because it says Holy Catholic Church. We need to point out, as you did before, it just means universal. Now, the question is, why did they pick that word? Why couldn't they have just said universal? So many people I know get hung up on that, and it seems unnecessary.
Well, it wasn't the creed that caused the problem. It was the church that took that name and applied it to themselves and called themselves Catholic, which happened after that creed was written.
Good point. Good point.
It was not, the term Catholic simply means universal, which is the same reason that the organization of a church and giving a name to it chose the same word.
Right.
Now, they didn't say Baptist because
the Holy Baptist Church
have identified a group.
Right. Right. So
now, if they would have said one universal church, and then the Catholics would have chosen the word universal instead of Catholic, we'd have the same problem.
That's an interesting thing. So it was appropriated, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think by intent, that's a good word that actually means something. And so the Catholic Church chose that word to name their church, and we've lost the meaning, and now it's become a proper noun.
Yep. And Southern Prairie Homestead is actually hitting on something that we were going to get to, and you and I actually talked about briefly before we started, and that is Constantine asked bishops to convene and hammer out a solution because of the divide in the church over the divinity of Christ.
Yes.
That's exactly right. Now, please continue on, Bulletproof.
Well, Constantine wasn't a horrible man to his core, but he did some things that weren't too pretty good. He didn't stick with the stuff. So he did a lot of things to sort of politically organize the world under his power, and that's kind of the same thing that Jeroboam did.
Right.
Abdicated God's leadership and decided to do things on his own. And you get in trouble every time you do that. But in the early days, when he did commission the councils of Nicaea and brought in leaders of the church, of the major churches in the world to come together and hammer this out. That was a good thing.
Yep.
So thanks, give him credit for what he did. I can even credit Satan for being consistent and tenacious in all that he does.
Oh, I don't know, man. You're treading on thin ice with me with that, bro. I don't know.
I mean, I hate him to the core, but that he is. You got to give him credit. He is certainly
that's
unwaveringly dedicated to his purpose, which I hate, but
which is okay. I can say that I hate that, but
you can hate that.
Yes, it's just icky. It's icky. I don't like that.
But like I said, you can't. Nothing is bad in every aspect, and the same thing for Constantine. He did some good things, and the one thing he did that was good was getting the church leaders together to bring unity within the church in the structure of what they believe, because there were others that came in that were developing their own pet doctrines that still exist today. But back then they were gaining ground and growing, and it became a huge problem.
Yeah, and
had to do with the deity of Christ.
Well, for Constantine, I don't think it had anything to do with anything except consolidation of power.
Yes.
But here's the big question, because I'm rubbed the wrong way. When we start talking about Constantine, I am rubbed the wrong way every time because of what a mess that man was and what he did. But
absolutely.
But here's the point I want to make. God still used him, and God still used what he allowed in order to bring about God's purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Therein lies the rub. I mean, even today, this is gonna be like vinegar coming out of my mouth, but it's still true. God is using Joe Biden. God is using Joe Biden for his purposes. Not Joe Biden's purposes, God's purposes. He is absolutely being allowed to do whatever God says he's being allowed to do. And I don't like that, but that's what it is. We can read it in scripture 50 different places. So let's take a look. Let's unpack the Apostles' Creed. I can go get the Nicene Creed if you want me to. I can go Google it and bring it over. But let's unpack it line by line, because I think it's important for us to see and say, is there anything in here that bugs me? Because when we get to the difference in he descended into hell, that's a big one. Because people get the impression that he was like somehow locked in a cage being tortured by demons. And no, negative. So, all right, let's do this.
Let me put this as a Baptist pastor. I had quite a lengthy time where either the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed was printed on the back of our bulletins.
Wow.
And we as a church recited it, and we went into its meaning and understanding, and trying to get these Baptists into build them a foundation that their faith can be that their faith can be expressed by.
Right.
And how unbaptist like. And boy, I tell you, when I first started doing that, I had huge pushback. And the one thing that dispelled it all is, what single line, any portion of that creed
do you disagree with? Yeah, exactly. And that was my whole point in trying to put these up. And I just got one. I'm going to add it. So,
okay.
First big line: I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. Anybody have issues with that one? that would be you. You can comment since this is radio. Since it's radio, you got to keep talking.
Crickets chirping. Theme song from Jeopardy playing.
Exactly.
You know, I do believe God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. It says so right there in Genesis 1. And we might add, when you talk about the unity of the Trinity, then you come into Jesus Christ, by whom all things were created. They were created by him and for him.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, I got a big conflict here. Well, no, you don't, because it's a Trinity. And if you have God, you have Jesus, you have the Holy Spirit. All three are one.
Right.
So line 1 gets an A+.
Okay. I am still trying to get another creed here going so that we can see both of them, but it's just being difficult. All right. Line 2. And well, there was a semicolon. And in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord. Yeah. Only Son is a big one, guys, because there are religions and denominations even that say that he was just a prophet. And
there are those who believe that Satan was also a son of God.
Well, that's baloney, because we can see that he was created.
But it is still taught today.
By who?
In a major religion.
Who?
In Salt Lake City.
Oh.
Yeah, actually teach that.
See, here's the thing. I know a lot of Mormons, and I know a lot of Mormons that from a human standpoint, you would say these are really great people.
Yeah.
But how could they get that one wrong? That one's a big one to get wrong.
Oh man. When I worked for a major electronics corporation in Maryland, one of our technicians there became a convert.
Oh.
And he was very talkative about all the new things he was learning. And he said, well, we were all told not to share any of these things, but they're just too cool not to share.
Oh my gosh.
And he began telling us all of the things that he was being taught in his indoctrination classes. And after a while, he quit sharing those things.
Because he realized what was going on, that you weren't having it.
Yeah. Well, he realized, this is just beyond ridiculous. You can't, they're so unbelievable in today's technology to believe that the 10 lost tribes of Israel are actually hidden in a Shangri-La environment up at the North Pole where they can't get out because of a wall of weather. And inside that little circle spot is perfect environment and perfect climate. And all of that, the things just got crazy.
Right.
And we got satellites that could find that spot in a fraction of a second. And yet, and the things and he was working in a high-tech environment where he knows these things. And so it was very unusual to watch the effect of what he was being taught clam him up.
Well, yeah. Well, and there's a good point to be had in there, in that it doesn't matter how smart you are, you can still be sucked in.
Yeah.
You can be sucked
in. I don't know
in.
that he ever left or ever came out, came to realization that a lot of this stuff he's being taught isn't true, or couldn't be true, but social acceptance, comfort, all of that, admission that you were wrong.
That's tough.
A lot of those things are compelling reasons that people do not change.
Yeah. So, okay, continuing on. Who was conceived by the Holy Spirit and born of the Virgin Mary. That's one of the ones that you have to just say, this is truth. It's 100% truth.
Right. And that flew right against some of the popular teachings of the day, because the teachings of that day had a growing group that believed that Jesus was an ambassador for God, but not God himself.
Well, that's
because
Islam.
God was never born, Jesus was.
Yeah. Well,
God didn't have to
Islam
grow
teaches that,
and become different. Jesus was a child and grew up to be a man.
right. Well, Islam itself teaches that Jesus was just a really good prophet.
Hmm.
That's a bad way to go.
Yeah, because if he was just a really good prophet, he was worthy of death because he violated the things that the prophet had to do, and he was a major liar.
Exactly. So there's a contradiction there,
You can't be a good liar.
right? Well, okay. Born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate. Fact. Even if you were not a believer at all, you can go back into historical documents, even like Josephus, and you know that Jesus lived, and you know that he was executed. That's a fact. Was crucified. Fact. Died. Fact. Was buried. Fact. He descended into hell. Here we go. What now? Why is it that so many people have this vision of Jesus having to be tortured by demons and devils when he was perfect here?
Again, we're playing here with the. I believe it is a tool of Satan rather than a development of man, but we see it in both cases. When you want to change a culture, you do it by modifying the definitions. And in the first